You're a good, thoughtful administrator or teacher, and you know that science is important. You've seen all the headlines about the increases in STEM careers, and you know you want your students to be prepared for them. You know that the type of thinking done in science is important for developing your students' critical thinking skills. And yet, you also know that science isn't tested heavily. And you've got so many kids struggling in reading and math. It's tempting to reduce the amount of time spent doing science, or to pretend that practicing reading with science-based books is enough. This video is about rethinking activity-based science as a literacy builder. It's about taking advantage of kids' natural curiosity, especially those kids who might struggle in other parts of school, and using science to motivate kids to work on their reading and writing skills. Let's imagine a lesson. The teacher brings in a bucket of worms, and each kid gets one. They spend a few minutes observing their worm and writing down their observations. Then they are told to make a specific observation, to hold out their finger and try to move it exactly as their worm moves. The students quickly realize their finger can't do exactly what the worm is doing. They can't stretch and then fatten their finger to move it along. How can this be? And how can they find out the answers to other questions that came up as they observed the worms? The teacher pulls out a picture book, Wiggling Worms at Work by Wendy Pfeffer. Before she reads, she and the students list the questions they are hoping the book will help them answer. Then she explains a specific reading comprehension strategy that they're going to use, making a mental movie about what they're reading. When a science book has pictures, they can be very helpful, but sometimes good readers need to imagine what is happening as they read. When the teacher reaches the page that describes how worms crawl, she says, "Remember how we talked about making a movie in your head? This page is going to be about movement, and anytime things are moving, it's a good idea to crank up your pretend movie maker. We have a picture here, but as I read, I want you to try to see a worm moving the way it is described here." She projects the text and reads, "Worms can wiggle, twist, turn, and even tie themselves in knots because they have no backbones. Their soft bodies are made up of rings or segments. These segments act like the coils on a slinky toy and let a worm bend." After finishing the page, she asks the students to describe what their imaginary movies looked like. After she finishes the book, the students pull out their writing notebooks and write a letter to a friend that explains how their worm moved and why the worm could stretch and shrink when their own finger could not. The students are hooked the moment they hold a wiggling worm. By the time the teacher turns to the book, the students are eager to read and primed to learn a new reading skill. When it comes to time to write, they are confident in their knowledge and ready to share what they've figured out. Elementary students are naturally curious and want to learn about how the world around them works. Science becomes the engine for the reading and writing train. The example works with worms, but the same structure can work for any science topic. You start with hands-on science, move to reading, and then writing. It works within a 5E framework for inquiry science, based on those middle 3 E's, the explore, the explain, and the extend, using reading for the explain and writing for the extend. It matches the 3-step system that reading teachers use to work with text. Considerable support before reading, some support during reading, and a little after reading. And think about it. Reading comprehension skills such as questioning text or relating to prior knowledge make a lot more sense if you really do want to find out the information that the text is telling you. Let's look at another lesson and focus a little more on the writing piece. We have students studying electricity using conductive modeling dough. They're given a lump of dough that carries electricity, a battery pack, and a light bulb, and are challenged to get the light bulb to light. They play around with it for a bit, and eventually some groups get the bulb to light and others don't. For this challenge, that's okay. We hand out a reading formatted as a how-to or procedural writing. As a class, We locate the key parts of the text, the title, the introduction, materials and step-by-step instructions, and the explanation. Groups who did not have a working circuit before read the instructions and create one, and then everyone reads the explanation to get ready for their next challenge. Add a switch to your circuit so that you can turn the light on and off. Fairly quickly, students begin to arrive on some variation of creating a break in the dough that can be opened and closed. Now comes the writing challenge. They saw earlier what science how-to writing should look like. Now they will give it a try. My focus here for science is on the explanation portion, so we will complete the step-by-step directions as a class, as a simple model for this type of writing. However, each student will write their own explanation. And before I turn them loose, we're going to spend a few minutes in pre-writing, which will help students organize their ideas and give them a sense of the breadth of the response that I'm looking for. First, we'll ask, what science vocabulary words might you use in your answer? Students can probably come up with several. And then I may specify that for this assignment, I especially want to see the words open and closed circuit in their explanations. We'll point out that a diagram might make their writing on this topic more clear. We'll remind them that diagrams should be explained in their writing and ask for some sentence frames that they might use to introduce a diagram or illustration. Because we've talked about this before, the students are able to suggest these frames. Once again, we have students who are invested in doing this writing. They have built something and they want to explain how they did it and why it works. You'll end up with responses like this. The battery has energy that it's sending through the positive side and going into the Play-Doh. The electricity goes all around in it. Then it comes to the light, and if the switch is on, the electricity goes back to the battery and the light is on. This is a closed circuit. If the switch is off, the electricity can't get back to the battery and the light is off. This is an open circuit. This diagram shows a closed circuit left and an open circuit right. There are some grammar errors here, so one next task is to revise and proof the writing. And once again, you have students who are motivated to make those changes. Finally, I want to point out here that if you use the doing, reading, writing lesson structure, you'll also be supporting many states' Common Core writing assessments. For many of these assessments, students are given 2 documents that they have to analyze and then combine into a logical argument. Assuming your students produce some kind of written observation or lab report from their hands-on work, when they sit down to write, they are working from 2 sources, their lab report and the text they read. So pairing lab work and reading as the preparation for writing builds the same analytical skills they will need for their writing assessments. Educational research supports the idea that when you teach reading and writing skills within the context of activity-based science, students show gains in all 3. So, when you find yourself and your school in the inevitable time bind that makes it hard to teach everything, consider using science as an engine for reading and writing instruction. To find out more, consider other videos in this series, including Knowing Enough to Read, Reading Strategies for Science, Sentence Frames for Reading, Writing, and Forming Science Knowledge, Integrating Writing and Science, Before and After Writing, Making Science Claims and Supporting Them with Evidence.